So let's begin by just taking a few moments to simply settle in. Just settle into this moment and into this space. Just allow yourself the opportunity to be here for the next few moments. You are engaging in the process of disengagement. It is said that meditation is the practice of stopping. So for the next few moments, allow yourself to come into stillness. To let go of the doing. Allow yourself to unwind into a state of simple being. Just allow yourself to stop. While sitting comfortably in your present space, just be present. Be right where you're at. At this time, it may be helpful to take a few deep, full breaths. And as you do, take note of the sensation of your breathing. As you inhale, take note that you are inhaling. When you exhale, notice that you are exhaling. You've been breathing all day, but perhaps you've been too busy to notice. But at this time, just take a moment to stop and notice. Just continue to take full breaths, deep, nourishing breaths. Know that with each breath you are filling yourself with life-sustaining oxygen. And as you inhale that oxygen, feel the energy of your breath flowing deep into your body. And then as you exhale, feel the release of energy and notice the calm, satisfied state of your body. And with each breath, you become more deeply relaxed and more deeply present as you just enjoy the silence. Allow yourself to just breathe freely. Know that your breathing comes naturally. And as you do this, watch as your breathing takes on its own natural rhythm. And it does not require any effort. Now simply notice the way in which your body is breathing effortlessly, and you're just observing it. You're no longer doing the breathing, but you're watching it. Just watch as your breath flows effortlessly in and out. Just relax and be with the breath. Allow your mind to settle, to relax. You're restful but not sleepy. Pay attention but not with excessive or restless energy. Rather, hold your mind gently with a relaxed state of awareness. And we're just going to continue to follow our breath. Just observe, watch, notice the natural flow. Now when you're ready, move your attention to the sensations present in your body. Notice the areas that are making contact with the chair. Pay attention to that contact. Just allow the chair to hold you, allowing gravity to keep you gently in place. There is nothing for you to do. It's all being done for you. You don't need to sit. Sitting is just happening. You are just observing. Notice how it feels. Notice and watch how your body rests comfortably. And as you settle more and more deeply into this present moment, as you truly continue to stop doing and just be present for a few moments, you see how there is nothing to do. It is all being done for you already. As you let go, you notice the rising of pure consciousness, simple, relaxed awareness. And the more you let go, the freer you become to simply observe and be present. As you sit in presence, you may notice how your mind begins to wander. You may find that stories and thoughts about the past or future seem to naturally arise. Perhaps you are having fantasies about one thing or another appearing in your mind. This is natural. In the same way that the lungs breathe, the mind thinks. That's what it does. The mind does not require intentional effort. It can and will think on its own, and it often does. But all you need to do is notice. If we allow the mind to wander freely, it will often take our attention out of the present moment. As a result, we are no longer fully present and fully aware. But in this meditation, we are training ourselves in mindfulness. And so for this reason, when we've noticed our wandering mind, we can be grateful for yet another opportunity to bring it back into the present moment. It's not bad that the mind wanders. We need not become frustrated. It is the wandering that allows us to recognize our state of mindlessness and thus return to a state of mindfulness. This is our practice. And as we become more still and more absorbed into this moment, we let go, and then we let go again and again. We let go of our expectations about meditation. We let go of our mental constructs and how this ought to be. Instead, we just open up to how it is. It is like this. We let go of our need for the experience to be a certain way. It's not like anything. It is just like this. It is not that way, it is this way. It is like this. Nothing more and nothing less, it's just this. Just this. Understand we're not allowing it to be like this, it already is. It does not need our approval to be any certain way. Our practice is to open up and to wake up to the now. The vast, empty now. We see it for what it actually is. To see that this is what it is. looks like this. And this. But now it's time to bring ourselves back to consciousness. Conscious seeing, conscious doing, conscious knowing. And we know that through every experience, our thoughts, our prayers, and so it is.
Please join me in our thoughts and prayers. Our thoughts are prayers, and we are always praying. Our thoughts are prayers, take charge of what you're saying. Seek a higher consciousness, a state of peacefulness, and know that God is always there. And every thought belongs somewhere. And thank you, Mary, for the lights. And now it's time for prayer.
All right. Let's start out with a little story.
Oh, good.
This is a true story, 100%. One day I heard zebras were grazing peacefully. They began to suspect that a pride of lions were waiting to ambush them in a nearby meadow. One of the zebras, who was kind of a know-it-all, confidently declared that there cannot be any lions in the next meadow because lions don't move into that area until autumn. And it's still July, so the lions could not have arrived yet. The other zebras were doubtful. But not wanting to be seen as wrong, the arrogant zebra thought he knew it all, and he decided to prove it. So he just trots confidently into the suspect meadow and is promptly devoured by the family of lions he insisted couldn't be there.
Uh-oh.
But then one of the other zebras shrugged and said, "Everybody knows the pride comes before the fall." 100% true story, right?
Sure.
Okay.
You say so, Brian.
You know, for as long as I can remember, Thomas has always been my favorite disciple. This is how John 20:24-29 narrates the scene when Jesus appears to Thomas. But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hand and put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them this time. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." And Thomas answered him, "My Lord, my God." Then Jesus said, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." So Thomas always seemed more relatable to me than the other 11, just because of this story. Traditional Christianity, though, has often portrayed Thomas as being flawed because he chose not to take the word of the other disciples that Christ had risen. It's understandable that people saw him as less, given what Jesus said after he had appeared to him. Blessed are those who believe but have not seen. Well, if you think about it, I guess the other disciples weren't blessed either, because they all saw him first. Nevertheless, we often view doubt as the enemy of faith. But that simply isn't the case. You see, doubt is a tool. Like any tool, it can produce positive or negative outcomes. It all depends on how you use it. Without doubt, how would we ever come to know the truth? Further, if you can't discern the truth, how will you ever gain understanding? You know, many popular spiritual gurus today make a hefty salary by telling people to be bold and confident and assertive. And sometimes this works if you're in a leadership position, if you're in a meeting or whatever. You don't want to appear uncertain if you want to lead people in a business situation or whatever. But have you ever met someone who has supreme confidence in their abilities they simply don't have? We can all think of people like that. I've had several bosses like that. But those people are pretty tough to deal with, aren't they? So confidence is great if it's justified. That's why we study the 12 powers here at Unity. We find them so valuable because they help us gain proficiency in knowing ourselves, understanding ourselves, and improving ourselves through self-examination. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And that's true. We must learn how to examine ourselves and our lives to make sure that we're going in the right direction. Because we can all swerve off the right path. Self-examination allows us to see where we've erred and allows us back onto the right path. So let's move on to what understanding is. Many people confuse understanding with wisdom, but it's actually very different. Wisdom can increase our understanding, but basically wisdom tells us how, and understanding tells us why. For example, music. I know how music is made, but I don't completely understand how it's made well. I can see the guy playing the piano, but I don't know the chords or how the melody fit together to make that music beautiful. I just know if I like it or not. And that's enough. I understand what I like, and that's enough for me. Understanding people, though, is the big thing. That's one of the hardest things to do because we're complicated beings. And sometimes we do things that don't always make sense. And we run into people and we have to deal with people that don't always make sense to us. Sometimes people may seem like they're intentionally rude or disrespectful. And we can't understand why this would be. A few weeks ago, I was driving down the expressway and my exit was coming. And I moved into the exit lane to the right. And that car caught him out of the corner of my eye, just really fast, cut me off. And then he had to slow down because he was on a curve. And I had to slam on my brakes. And fortunately, you know, I just thought, gosh, there's a spiritual lesson in this for me. Well, I wish that's what had happened. No, what happened was I have an air horn right here. I needed that air horn to express my outrage. I hate the little tiny city horns. I always use this one because I need to let people know. I need to scare everybody around me that I'm upset. But you know, as I was coming down the ramp, I saw him jump over onto the curb. There were 5 cars down there sitting in the light. And as I came down, he went around those cars and screeched off right-hand turn. What a jerk, right? But as I got, and just as he made the turn, the light turned green and everybody took off, and I turned right the same way he did. And I was curious, you know, what, is he in a wreck yet? I mean,
Yeah.
well, what I noticed when I went around the curve was a sign, hospital,
What was it?
hospital.
Oh.
And as I went past the next intersection, I looked up and I could see his car moving through the parking lot and right to the emergency room. So you see me expressing my outrage. Yeah, wasn't exactly the right thing to do. I lacked understanding. I didn't know the whole story. All right.
Pretty good lesson. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lesson. I just had to wait for it.
Yeah.
And I got to blow my own. It was a win-win. Kids loved it. Anyway, so the acquisition of understanding is of paramount importance when it comes to leading a more compassionate and peaceful life. But there's another reason that understanding is important. It leads us to the conclusion and the knowledge that we as individuals will never be able to understand everything. We're living in a very complicated time. So many things have become so complicated, so developed. It seems like there's a specialist for everything now. These specialists, we know, keep things moving smoothly and actually improve our lives in various ways. We don't know exactly how, but we can be confident that they do. There was a time when if you needed dental work, you went to a barbershop.
Yes.
You know, that's why the pole is red and white. That red is blood.
Oh, yeah.
It's not because they
And
did.
white's the sheets.
Yeah, it's not because they nipped your ear. Okay. But as dental field became more advanced, people began to doubt that the barber shop was the ideal place to get dental work done, even though it was probably convenient to have a tooth pulled and your hair cut at the same time. It would have saved a bunch of time, right? So today, not only do we have dentists, we have endodontists, and orthodontists, etc. We can see that the field of dentistry has improved, even if it was not more convenient to get your hair cut the other end tooth pulled. The same can be said for the medical field. Everything requires a specialist these days. And that can be a bit intimidating at times because you're not just going to the same guy. You're not going to the guy that, you know, healed your cow last week. Because that was the way it was some time ago. The field has improved by leaps and bounds regarding the nature of illness and various cures. There was a time that if you were a physician, if you were ill, the physician would just tap a vein and let a little bad blood out. Right? That was pretty common. And a lot of people who were sick a couple hundred years ago died from the loss of blood. It made them weak, but they didn't understand that. They just thought there was good blood and bad blood. We'll get rid of some of the bad blood and you'll create new blood and you'll be fine. And there is one illness that I think does work that way, but it didn't work for everybody, for every illness. Specialization can be overwhelming. We go through life and we don't fully understand so many things that are going on around us. But as long as we understand that we don't have to understand it all, life becomes a bit less stressful, and we also become less cynical or suspicious. You know, when I was a kid, there was a TV show called In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, and that show was all about these conspiracy theories, Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot. Right? I loved those shows. As I got older, I realized that these conspiracy theories were fun because they explain things that I didn't understand in an interesting way, you know. We have a lot of that going on today, a lot of conspiracy theories. They're up floating around. They're just bigger than ever. You know, I think it started with JFK, right?
Yeah.
And then the moon landing.
Yep.
You know, there's a picture of an astronaut supposedly on the moon, and the flag is there in the picture, and it's waving.
Waving?
So conspiracy theories have been going around for years about how that flag can be waving when there's no wind on the moon. It's been going on for years. Finally, some things were declassified, and what we found out was that the astronauts were practicing their moon landing, and everything that was, NASA tried to recreate as best they could the circumstances and the situations that they would run into when they got on the moon. That was actually a soundstage. That was part of their training.
Oh, so it wasn't?
It was in California. It wasn't an actual, I mean, who took the picture?
Yeah, I always wondered that too.
Right? But yet, nevertheless, I mean, that went on for decades. You know. But you know, back to the doctor thing. Just imagine if a doctor never doubted his abilities enough to go to medical school.
Mm.
He was like, yeah, I could do it.
Sure.
I don't need to study or any of that. Or what if a doctor gave you a diagnosis and into the treatment you realized he was wrong? Would you want him to just stick with that same treatment, or would you want him to adjust?
Adjust.
Exactly. I want a doctor that questions his own diagnosis and keeps trying to improve his healing skills. And that's why they call it a practice.
It's practice, yeah.
Because it's not perfect. It's practice makes perfect, right? I also want plumbers, electricians, school teachers, and countless other professionals who know more about their jobs than I do. The gutters needed to be cleaned. I was going to get up there with a scoop and scoop them out. We have someone that knows more about cleaning gutters than I do. So I'm grateful for Rob.
Yeah.
Jack of all trades, doing the sound right now too.
Yes. And did the read.
But nevertheless, we should always maintain a little bit of doubt when dealing with professionals, because it will cause us to increase our knowledge just enough so that when their services are needed, we can have a better understanding of things that affect us. And the more you understand, I've found, the more stress, or the less stress to have. Even more importantly, increasing our level of understanding helps us become more compassionate towards people who appear different or foreign to us. It makes compassion for others easier to express. Here's an example. You come across a homeless person living behind the church there, and you know this person is homeless and they don't have a job. Well, without understanding their situation, you might jump to the conclusion that they are just stupid or lazy. But if you take time to examine that person's circumstances, you will probably discover that there are other reasons how they wound up the way they are. Could be addiction, could be mental illness, or it could just be some extreme misfortune that occurred to them that was beyond their control. Or maybe it was even in their control, but they made a bad decision, or two or three. They made these bad decisions based on their lack of wisdom and therefore their lack of understanding. But whatever the reason for their circumstances, though, as Christians, we must always strive to generate compassion for the less fortunate. And we must always focus on having an understanding heart, as Solomon once asked for. Therefore give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people and discern between good and evil, Or who was able to govern this great people? You know, today we're constantly told that we should fear people who are different than us. We are told that these foreigners are dangerous and that they're here to hurt us. They're not sending us their best. We need to strongly doubt these ideas. If you've ever met any of these folks, you know that most of the time fear is unwarranted. So we shouldn't just have blind faith in what we are being told.
Right.
Not even by your favorite news source. And we all have our own favorites. And we watch them because it tells us what we want to hear. I always try to get the other side just to see whatever the other side's talking about. And that's a great idea for everybody. Everybody needs to do that. If you're going to pay attention to the news at all, get it from all sides, at least. This will increase your understanding. And I got to admit, you know, I'm watching a channel that I completely disagree with, but I hear their side of the story, and there's some, okay, I can kind of see how they got to where they got to, at least, right? But how we treat people who are different is easy for us because the Bible tells us how to do it, exactly. Leviticus 19:33-34 tells us how to treat foreigners. When a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you. And you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. There's another line I couldn't...
What?
What's that?
What was that scripture? Leviticus.
Leviticus 19:33-34. There's another line that I didn't include, but it's one of my favorites. And it goes something like, be sure to love your enemies and love the foreigners as yourself. Don't just love people who are just like you. Even the pagans do that. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like that. If you're only loving your family and your friends, you're not doing the Christian thing. That part is easy, and everybody does that. Or most of everybody, anyway. Also, there's Deuteronomy 24:14. You shall not oppress a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your brothers or one of the sojourners, traveler, who are in your land and within your towns. Pretty simple, really. Of course, we aren't just supposed to be just to the foreigners. We're not just supposed to be fair to foreigners. The Bible also tells us how to treat all people who are less fortunate than us. Jeremiah 7:5-7 says, for if you truly amend your ways and your deeds, if you truly execute justice one with another, if you do not oppress the sojourner, the fatherless, or the widow, or shed innocent blood in this place, and if you do not go after other gods to your own harm, then I will let you dwell in this place. I want to point out the last part of that. I think the last part of that quote is important. It tells us not to go after or follow gods to our own harm. How many of you attended a different church before coming here? In your past?
A long time ago.
A long time ago. Well, at some point then, you began to doubt that you belonged at that church, or you doubted what they were telling you. So basically, at one point, we were all doubting Thomases, and that's what brought us here.
Yes, exactly.
So the fact is, doubt is the beginning stage of understanding, and it's the beginning of informed faith. Doubt is essential to preventing false beliefs, and I'm not just talking about religious beliefs, I'm talking about error thoughts as well. Error thoughts include the false ideas of unworthiness or other self-limiting thoughts. Now here at Unity, we use denials and affirmations to try to eventually improve the quality of the chatter that's always going on in our minds. That's what the meditation we did was all about. But we must at first doubt a thing is true before a denial can be effective. If you're just saying, I deny this and I affirm that, it's not going to work. You have to truly analyze what you're denying so that you understand why you're denying it. I've done that. Coming down the highway, something terrible enters my mind, I deny that thought. A couple days later, same stupid thought. A week later, same stupid thought. Right? So basically, the effectiveness of denial and affirmations take a while to set themselves in your subconsciousness, because that's where that chatter's coming from. You have no control over it. But until that happens, there's something else you can do. When you are meditating or at any other time that you have time to do it, just try examining each thought from a distance. If you do this enough, eventually you will learn that you and those thoughts are completely separate from each other. In other words, you will begin to realize that those random thoughts aren't under your control. We have virtually no control over the thoughts that flow through our minds constantly. I'm talking about that inner dialogue, again, that runs through your mind. At least we have virtually no control over these thoughts before we have them. Now, if you're doubting me, and you should, I want you to close your eyes for 10 seconds and I want you to predict the next thought that's going to enter your mind. You can't do it. Therefore, because these thoughts function independently from us, or at least our consciousness, it is essential that we doubt their validity, especially the negative thoughts. People who lack doubt must also lack that inner dialogue, otherwise doubt's inevitable. It's there to keep us safe from physical harm. Remember the zebra story? They doubted what the overconfident zebra was saying, and they're still living. The other one in. In fact, most of us are probably descendants of people who doubted. They had that stronger survival instinct, right? But one thing about that inner dialogue, it does determine how we see ourselves as material beings most of the time. Material beings as in our persona, or as Fillmore said, our personalities. But it's not who we really are, or at least it's not all we are. Personality, a veil or mask worn by man that conceals the real spiritual I am. Then we have our individuality, the true self, that which is undivided from God, our spiritual identity. These thoughts that are popping up are really a function of our personality. And of course, eventually we want our personality and our individuality to be perfect. But our individuality, this stream of consciousness, does not have or need that inner dialogue. That's the difference. One of my favorite authors right now is Eckhart Tolle, and he wrote a book called The Power of Now. In that book, he talks about separating ourselves from that inner dialogue and practicing just being in the moment, just being in the now. It's called mindfulness. That's how we quiet down that inner dialogue. So people who have been able to quiet that inner dialogue, people who have been able to accomplish this state of freedom and understanding describe it as complete bliss. Just being in the now. Instead of closing your eyes when you meditate, sometimes just sit out in nature and just watch the birds and the leaves flutter, and don't think about anything else. If a thought comes into your mind, just kind of gently push it away. You don't have to be rough with it, because what you resist persists, so you just want to let it go and understand that it's there for a reason, but it's not yours. If you don't want it, it just floats off. And in the meantime, watch the birds floating around. I was doing that this morning. One bird was chasing another bird, and for a good 3 or 4 minutes, I was totally, just totally into those two birds. What was that? Wait. The first bird, is that like the female bird, and guys like chasing her, or are they friends and they're just playing? I don't know. I prefer to think they were just friends and they're just playing. I don't want to, like a stalker bird or anything like that. Remember what Jesus told Thomas? Blessed are those who believe without seeing. In other words, people who lack fear or doubt. But how do you get rid of doubt? You get rid of doubt by being 100% sure. When I was sitting there and the wind was blowing and the leaves were rustling and the birds were flying and tweeting, and I knew that there's something bigger there and that I'm connected to all of it, right? Once you gain that understanding that we are consciousness, just as God is consciousness. In other words, once you know your true self, then you can remove any doubts and trust your faith is true. Because then you will understand that you are truly made in the image of the likeness of God. I am. And I am done.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
So now, we move on to Annie with another great song. Talk about the bliss. Ignorance is bliss, but also understanding is bliss. And once you understand your identity at the I am, there's nothing left except to be happy. Right?
That's right.
Here comes badness, I've been listening.